Hello, my name is Tasso Comanescu and welcome to EliteGuitarist.com. Today, I'll be walking you through the first of the 20 Sor studies that Segovia assembled in 1945 from the 18th century Spanish composer Fernando Sor's immense output for the classical guitar. And these 20 studies that Segovia selected were chosen for their innate musical and technical qualities. And we'll be looking at the first one today in C major. So the study, being in C major, starts on a C major chord. And so we're going to put our third finger on the A string, or fifth string, at the third fret, and then our first finger on the B string, first fret, right here. And this is the first chord. And then we have a walking bass line going up, C, E, and then F. Our E is on the second fret of the D string, and our F is on the third fret of the D string, right here. And you'll find in the addition that there is a crescendo, so it's nice to start piano and grow through the measure, focusing on the bass line. Okay? And going into bar 2, we have our first legato challenge, as it were. And we have a guide finger, which is our third finger, and it's going to go from the third fret of the fourth string to the fifth fret of the fourth string. And we also have our first finger going from the first fret of the second string to the third fret of the second string. So we actually have two guide fingers, and we're going from this shape right here to this shape. So it's important to visualize where you're going, and you're going to add your pinky on the fifth fret of the third string right here. So this is the transition. And I like to do a slight roll with my right hand and vibrato to emphasize the 4-3 suspension, because it's a G major chord. We're taking the C, which is the fourth, and resolving it to the third right here. So we're in bar 2. This is beat 1 of bar 2. This is beat 2. Our second finger goes on the B, which is the fourth fret of the third string. And then we go to beat 3, which involves our third finger going back down 2 frets to the F, which is the third fret of the D string. And we have a C sharp with our second finger on the second fret of the B string right here, with an open E on top, followed by a E on the second fret of the fourth string. So this is bar 2. And at bar 3, we have a D minor chord on beat 1, and that is involving our first finger on the first fret of the high E string and our pinky on the third fret of the B string right here. And our thumb will play an open D. And we have the walking bass line idea here again. D, F, G. D is the open fourth string, F is the third fret of the fourth string, and then we have our open third string, which is the G. So this is bar 3. And now, in measure 4, we have another suspension, 4-3 suspension of an A minor chord, like this. So I like to roll that and give it some vibrato, just like in measure 2, to emphasize the suspension. And this A minor chord has our second finger on the second fret of the third string, our fourth finger on the third fret of the second string, and an open E on top. And then it resolves to the first fret of the second string, which is a C. And then on beat 3, we have our pinky on the third fret of the B string and our first finger on the first fret of the high E string with an open G in the bass, followed by an F at the third fret of the fourth string. So this is bar 4 altogether. So I'll play the first 4 bars now in order for you. going into bar 5 is our first real challenge to play legato. And I always use this analogy with students. Imagine that you're walking down the street and you always have your right foot or left foot touching the pavement. There's never a moment in time where there isn't one foot touching down. And so that is how we should approach shifts. We're always hearing at least one note, and then we move to the next note as quickly as we can. And it's important to use these guide fingers, in this case our pinky. So coming out of bar 4, our pinky is going to slide across 2 frets to the E, the 5th fret of the 2nd string, and we're going to add our first finger on the E, which is the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and our 2nd finger on the G, which is the 3rd fret of the high E string. So the first major change looks like this. Notice how I'm just kicking my pinky out and adding my 2 fingers where they need to go. Now we're in bar 5, and in bar 5 starts an amazing sequence where we have imitation going on between 3 voices. The top 2 voices move in thirds. And the bass moves stepwise down the scale. Amazing contrapuntal voice writing, or voice leading, I should say, by Fernando Sor. And this starts on beat 2 of measure 5. So we have an A minor chord here. So measure 5 looks like this. And one thing I'll say is it's really important, if you really want to maximize the benefits from this study, is to hold every single note for its written value. So if you see a quarter note, hold it for a quarter note. If you see an eighth note, hold it for an eighth note. Later on in the piece, when we see half notes, hold them for 2 beats. And that's how you gain maximum benefit from this study. So closing out measure 5, we go to this chord right here, 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and 1st finger on the 1st fret of the B string, followed by an open G, and then we go to a 1st inversion D minor chord, right there, which has our 3rd finger on the F, 4th finger on the D, and 1st finger on the F here. Notice how I'm holding the bass note through the entire beat. So this is measure 5. And then going into measure 6, we have a 2/3 bar on beat 1, and we're going to hold the top note, which is a D, through the beat, because that's a quarter note, along with the B underneath it, and we start the bass line walking down from G to F to E. We're using our 1st finger as a guide finger down to the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Notice how my pinky is hovering right above where it needs to go, and as soon as I shift, I place it on the C, which is the 5th fret of the 3rd string. And I'm grabbing that open E with my A finger here in the right hand. And speaking of the right hand, in a slower study like this, you should use whichever finger is most comfortable for you. And sometimes I make decisions based on how my nails are feeling that day, so on and so forth. So that part I wouldn't think about too much in this study. It's mainly focusing on the left hand. So this starts beat 2 of measure 6, and we're going to hold the bass note. We have a 3rd relationship between C and open E, and that's going to move down stepwise to B and D right here. And the B is at the 4th fret of the 3rd string, and the D is at the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. So we have this going on beat 2 of measure 6. Notice how as soon as I'm letting go of my pinky, my 2nd and 3rd finger are coming down on the strings, sort of using that analogy of walking. There's never a moment where they're not touching the strings. Okay, and then going to beat 3, we're going to use our 3rd finger as a guide finger, moving down 2 frets to the A, which is the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And we're going to play an F chord with our pinky on the 3rd fret of the D string and our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the B string like this, which is also a 3rd, A to C, and we're walking the bass line down from F to E with our 2nd finger on the 4th string. So measure 6 goes something like that. Okay. And we have measure 6 going into measure 7. We have 2 guide fingers, our 3rd and 1st finger, which are going to slide up 2 frets each on the same string, and we're going to add an open D, which is a G chord in 2nd inversion, and we're going to go right back to where we came from. That's beat 1, and then we're going to go to an E major chord on beat 2 of measure 7, which involves our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string and our 1st finger on the G sharp, which is the 1st fret of the 3rd string, and an open B like this. And on the end of that beat, we're playing an open D, which is guiding us as part of that walking bass line down to a C on the 3rd fret of the A string. This is on beat 3 of measure 7. And we're adding our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the B string like this. And then holding that C in the bass through the open B and G on the and of beat 3 of measure 7. And so now going into measure 8, we have a tricky part. There are no common fingers or guide fingers in this shift. So we have to release everything and jump to this D major chord here in the 2nd position. Okay? So anytime you have a jump like this, I always tell my students, look at what your hand looks like at the very end of the measure, okay, like this, and think about where it has to go and what finger is doing the most work. And in this case, it's your 3rd finger. You have to go from the 3rd fret of the A string to the 4th fret of the D string. And that's actually not that difficult. If you think about it, you're just moving 1 fret over on an adjacent string. The hard part is when you throw in the other fingers, and that's sometimes when we get out of sorts with a shift. So it's important to have your other fingers that you're using relaxed and ready to go. And in this case, we're putting our pinky at the start of measure 8 on the 5th fret of the A string and our 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, like this. The bass line will move. Our 2nd finger will now play a C on the 3rd fret of the A string. This is beat 1 of measure 8. Walking down to B in the bass, which is the 2nd fret of the A string, and we're adding an open G and our pinky on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string on the D there. And we have 2 common fingers here going to beat 3. We're going to slide them up to the chord, which is a C major chord. Our 2nd finger's on the C, and our pinky goes down on the E, which notice it's on the 2nd string. It's not on the open 1st string. It's much more beautiful. And I try to play a little vibrato right there. Maybe roll the chord. Do a sort of Segovia style slice there. Press the string there, if you will. And then it moves to measure 9, which is all open strings. We get to relax our left hand. This is open D, G, and B. Then A and C. Back to our D chord shape. And then measure 10. And it's moving to octave Gs. Notice how our 2nd finger is free here, so we can put it right down as soon as we release the other 3. You can practice that shift like this. And then on beat 2 and 3 of measure 10, we have single notes, a G on the 5th fret of the 4th string, and then an F on the 3rd fret of the same string, with accents and a crescendo sign, and I actually like to vibrato here. That takes us to the 3rd system, measure 11.